Good afternoon, class. Today we're going to begin reading Chapter 28 from our zoology textbook together. Hopefully this will give you an example of how to approach the reading of scientific texts, which can often be full of information and a little more difficult to read. So let's begin by looking over how the first page is set up. At first glance, I can see the title is large and bolded, and it tells me that this chapter is about temperature and body fluid regulation. But what exactly will be addressed is still fairly vague from just reading over the title. I also noticed, however, that to the left-hand side, the authors have provided me with an outline of the chapter, as well as the section called Concepts here in the middle. So I can determine that reading through these before I start reading the actual chapter might give me some idea of what I will be learning and about what I should be focusing on. So let's start with reading the outline topics the authors have provided for us. Homeostasis and temperature regulation, the impact of temperature on animal life, heat gains and losses, some solutions to temperature fluctuations, temperature regulation in vertebrates and in fishes, etc. Okay, so by reading this, I'm given some more information than the title alone provides, and I can see that the chapter is about temperature and specifically how temperature impacts animals, as well as how they are able to regulate this. Now let's move on to the area labeled concepts and see what information from this chapter we can acquire by reading through the first one. Okay, so first off, I'm faced with a kind of complex word that I might not know the exact meaning, thermoregulation. So I can look at this word and break it into parts to see if maybe I can figure out what it means. Looking at the first part of the word thermoregulation, I have thermo, and now I'm going to think, do I know any words similar to this? Well, thermo makes me think of thermometer, which I know is a device to measure temperature. So now I'm thinking that thermoregulation has something to do with temperature. Looking at the second part of the word, which is the more familiar regulation, it's easily determined that the root word here is regular, so putting the two parts of the word together, I can assume that thermoregulation means to make temperature regular. As I continue to read this sentence, I can see that it states that thermoregulation maintains an animal's body temperature. Therefore, not only have I broken down the word to determine the meaning, but I can be sure that I'm correct by comparing it to the rest of the stated definition. Finally, in the next sentence, you can see that the authors give us more scientific terms, the meanings of which you may not directly know. Based on this regulation, animals can be categorized as endotherms or ectotherms and homeotherms or heterotherms. However, we can use the same types of strategies we did with thermoregulation to determine what the meanings are. Now let's move on to the first part of the actual text. The Earth's environments vary dramatically in temperature and amount of water present. Okay, so here we can see that the author is describing an environment for us, and therefore it may be helpful to visualize what these environments are like in our head as we read. In the polar regions, high mountain ranges, and deep oceans, the temperature remains near or below 0 degrees Celsius throughout the year. Temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius are common in equatorial deserts. Between these two extremes, in the Earth's temperate regions, temperatures fluctuate wildly. The temperate regions have varying amounts of water, as well as varied habitats: freshwater, saltwater, wetlands, mountains, and grassland. So here we see the authors pointing out a few regions which are pretty extreme temperature differences. So here we might wonder why the author is discussing environments when the chapter is about animals. However, we can perhaps then make an inference due to the previous information given in the outline that the author is giving us some background knowledge as to why animals might need to regulate or control their body temperatures in response to environmental temperatures in which they live. Now let's continue reading the next paragraph. Animals have successfully colonized these varied places on Earth by possessing homeostatic mechanisms for maintaining a relatively constant internal environment despite fluctuations in the external environment. Okay, so that's a lot of information in one sentence, and I wasn't totally sure what the author was stating, so let me go back and reread that portion of the sentence again. Animals have successfully colonized or taken over these varied or different places on Earth by possessing homeostatic. Okay, I'm not sure what that word means exactly, but I know I can go back and break down the root words, but for now let's keep reading, and maybe the text itself will give me an idea of what it means. Homeostatic mechanisms for maintaining a relatively constant internal environment despite fluctuations in the external environment. Okay, so I continue to read and I could see that the rest of the sentence did provide new information on what homeostatic means, as it states that animals have mechanisms that control their internal environment, which we can determine is their temperature and body fluids.